The true history of ancient Egypt is far older than what we were taught in school. And in this video, I'm going to give you 3 examples that will make you rethink virtually everything you thought you knew about the age of the ancient Egyptians. You see, according to our textbooks, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt, was constructed roughly 4,500 years ago, or in the year 2500 BC. But let's be clear, they do not know that with absolute certainty, as there are far too many unanswered questions and mysteries about the ancient Egyptians. This is why you'll see words like suggest when modern historians discuss the purported age of the Great Pyramid, because they ultimately do not have definitive proof of when it was constructed, much less how. So make no mistake, it truly is a mystery. And this is where things start to get weird, because there is new evidence that has come to light in modern times that strongly suggests that the world's oldest, largest, and most mysterious structures ever made is actually thousands of years older than what we were taught. Let me first share with you an ancient artifact that very few people are aware of, which is commonly referred to as the Nubian Egg, which was discovered in a 7,000-year-old tomb in the Nubian desert of Sudan. And I was completely unaware of this incredible artifact until I visited the Nubian Museum in Aswan, Egypt, while I toured ancient Egypt sites late last year. What you're looking at here is a decorated ostrich egg, which, like I said, was discovered in a tomb that was carbon dated to 7,000 years ago. And what do you see on this egg? Well, if you ask me, that is the depiction of 3 pyramids, but let me be clear up front. The so-called experts have said that they couldn't possibly be pyramids since this relic is 2,500 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza, so of course it couldn't possibly be depicting pyramids. Thus, they've claimed that this must be just a depiction of mountains. End of story, nothing to see here. But when you take a closer look, what on earth are those lines supposed to be? I mean, never mind that this drawing would be illustrating some pretty bizarre-shaped mountains like I've never seen before. I mean, come on. This was found in the Nubian desert of Sudan. Which mountains exactly is this supposed to be portraying? I mean, if they are going to adamantly claim that these are just mountains, then which mountains specifically are they suggesting it's supposed to be? I took it upon myself to look up the various mountain chains that are located in Sudan, and I have to say that I found nothing of the sort. I mean, is this supposed to be of the 9,800-foot Dariba caldera, which obviously looks nothing like it? Or perhaps the Tatil Mountains in eastern Sudan? No. Or what about the Altaka Mountains? I have to say that that's obviously the best choice when compared to the others, but that would have to be a rather terrible pictorial example of them on this egg. I mean, just compare the 2 of them together. And I'd say that it's simply not a match considering how sharply shaped this depiction is. And I'm just not seeing a connection here. And to be fair, nobody that's claimed that this pictorial image is of mountains has actually claimed that they are of the Altaka Mountains. Like I said, I simply took it upon myself to research various mountains located in Sudan to see if there was any type of connection. And with that said, I have to say that the Nubian pyramids located in Sudan seem to resemble the angle of the drawings based on the unique steepness compared to other pyramids, such as the ones we find in Giza. However, these pyramids were constructed some 2,000 years after the pyramids of Giza and approximately 5,000 years after the Nubian Egg itself. But most importantly, and getting back to the point I made a moment ago about the lines on the depiction, let's be real. This is exactly what pyramids are. They consist of layers of steps which result in the pyramid itself. So I have to say that this in itself rules out that they are mountains. I like to think for myself, and this just is not what mountains look like, which is exactly what the experts claim them to be. And they do not allege them to be of the Nubian pyramids either, but again, of some unspecified mountains, and there just so happens to be 3 of them, which is what we happen to find on the Giza Plateau, relatively not far away up the Nile River. The same place where modern researchers have already suggested that the pyramids of Giza are much, much older than what we thought possible. But of course, nothing here is certain, and this depiction certainly does not prove that the Great Pyramid is more than 7,000 years old. However, it is certainly worthy of discussion and debate. Nevertheless, there is more to this egg than just those pyramid mountains or whatever you want to call them. Notice the zigzag shape to the right of it. Could this be the Nile River? I mean, it's not hard to suggest it when you consider the fact that the Nile does indeed zigzag for thousands of mountains all the way down to the Nubian Desert of Sudan. And not only that, it happens to be on the right, or let's say the eastern side of the potentially annotated pyramids, which is exactly the case of what we find in Cairo with the Nile River being east of the Giza Plateau. But that's not all. This is just one side of the egg. When we go to the other side, we get another depiction of the same pyramid-shaped formation, however, with this different, unique formation to the right of it. Could this once again be depicting the Nile River? Because when you consider the area of the Nile known as the Fayoum Oasis, which is south and west of Cairo, and which today resembles the shape of a heart, consider how this shape on the egg stems sharp to the left, or let's say west, and is now below, or let's say south, of the possible pyramid depiction. This is very similar to what we see in Egypt. The Fayoum Oasis, like I said, is south of Giza and extends to the west. Now, here is one point that must be mentioned, which is that the path and shape of the Nile River today is not the same as it was thousands of years ago. The river has moved paths many times over the last several thousand years, as this has been something that's been studied extensively, so we should not assume that the depictions on this egg, assuming that it is of the Nile, would be exactly the same as it were when it was drawn some 7,000 years ago, and of course, these are indeed rudimentary drawings onto an ostrich egg, so it's not like it would be perfect or much less drawn to scale either. But come on. The two drawings of the so-called mountains on this egg have lines that go right through them. So I'm just going to say it. I think that this is annotating pyramids. I mean, I've already been highly suspicious that the Great Pyramid and the pyramids of Giza, as well as certain other sites around Egypt, are much, much older than what they are alleged to be. But when it comes to sciencing things out, I'll save my suspicions for another video. Because there is another fascinating aspect of this egg that really makes me wonder. Look at the top here of this egg, these circular rings. Where on earth have we seen that before? The Lost City of Atlantis was said to consist of 3 rings of water and 2 of land, and let's not forget that the legend of the Lost City of Atlantis originates from the ancient Egyptians themselves. That's a fact that most people are not aware of, as the ancient Greek philosopher Plato gets all the credit, but Egypt is where the legend of a lost circular city consisting of 3 rings of water and 2 of land comes from. So when you look at this here, tell me that's not what we're seeing, or at least possibly. I mean, I really wish I had better photos, but the great news is that I'll be back in Egypt this October with Brian Forrester, and I will be sure to get high definition pictures and videos of this egg this time around. But I don't know, guys. I think there's something here, and whoever the person was that was buried with this egg was perhaps trying to tell a story of this person's various travels through life, or possibly even pass down and spread the tale of the destroyed ancient city of Atlantis, which the Egyptians were said to have came from. This is something I will discuss more in another video, but going back to my main point, which is that Egypt was much older than what we were taught, let me bring you to the second point of this video, which is another profound discovery that came about late last year at the same time that I happened to be traveling through Egypt. What you're seeing here are pieces of ancient cedar wood that have been preserved after being removed from the Great Pyramid back in 1872. It was then taken to a museum in Britain, but unfortunately, it went missing for more than a century not long after arriving at the museum, and it turns out that was due to a filing error, and it sat in the museum's archives for well over 100 years. But in late 2020, it was rediscovered within the museum's archives, and when it was carbon dated, researchers were blown away at the findings. So get this, at a minimum, this wood dates back at least 514 years older than the suggested date for the Great Pyramid's construction. And that was the headline that made rounds around the world, that a piece of wood that is 500 years older than the pyramid in which it was found inside of. However, there was a range of dating for the wood that most articles did not mention, which is that it could be as much as 781 years older than the suggested construction date of the Great Pyramid. That's 267 years more than 514 years. So in other words, nearly 800 years older than the purported age of the Great Pyramid. I mean, that's closer to 1,000 years older than the pyramids, and yes, I shouldn't get carried away with rounding up, but that's substantial. But that aside, what are the possible explanations for a 5,000-year-old piece of wood being found in a 4,500-year-old pyramid? Well, the experts came up with 3 different possible explanations, but I have to say that of the 3 of them, 2 of them are unbelievably weak excuses. For example, one suggested possibility is that the wood was already 500 years old when it was used for the construction of the pyramid because trees were rare in the deserts of Egypt, so it would have been recycled. But, you know, I'm sorry, that has to be one of the laziest possibilities out there. I mean, I just don't buy it, because to suggest that a piece of wood would be continuously recycled for 5 centuries sounds less than feasible, especially when you consider that it would be used to construct something as enormously heavy and massive as a frickin' pyramid. I mean, come on, give me a break. But another possibility was that the 500-year-old wood was intentionally used because of its age in order to honor the pharaoh and the extensive age and history of Egypt. Now, nah, I'm not buying that either. I mean, really? I mean, come on. Hey, look, here's some really old wood. Let's just throw this all in here in the pyramid and honor the pharaoh, give it an artistic edge based on its age. I mean, come on, please. But let me say this, the best and most probable possibility given was that the cedar tree itself may have already been hundreds of years old when it was cut down and used for the pyramid's construction. And when we consider that cedars can live up to 1,000 years in age, that certainly is a possibility. I feel like more scientific testing needs to be done on this wood to establish various possibilities of its age and where it may have originated from. But when we think of an ostrich egg with pyramids drawn on it being placed inside of a 7,000-year-old tomb, it makes me think that the cedar wood itself was placed inside the pyramid far earlier than 4,500 years ago. Now, the third point of this video to build the case that the true age of the ancient Egyptians is thousands of years older than we thought brings me back to a point that I've mentioned in many prior videos, but it must be repeated as much as possible so far more people can become aware of it, as it is unbelievably significant scientific evidence that is ultimately undeniable to anyone that's actually done the research, which is the remarkable amount of rainwater erosion around the enclosure of the Great Sphinx of Giza. To make a long story short, we all know that Egypt is one dry place, and the last time it had any significant rainfall was nearly 9,000 years ago. Yet, there appears to be many thousands of years of water erosion around the limestone bedrock of its enclosure that it was carved out of. This becomes even more interesting when we consider that the Sphinx itself was known to have been consumed with sand for thousands of years. So the question becomes, when did the rainwater erosion happen? And when the so-called experts have claimed that the Sphinx is most likely around 4,200 years old. And by the way, they say that without any real proof. Nowhere in Egypt will you find any depictions or any type of documents of the Sphinx or when or how it was constructed. Nor do we even know for sure who the person whose face was recarved into it. There are theories, but nothing is certain. Think about that. You see, the science, which is something we hear about all the time nowadays, tells us that the Sphinx is significantly older by many thousands of years. The water erosion is there. Geologists have extensively studied it and concluded that the erosion is so significant that it would have had to have taken many thousands of years to reach this point. And again, this is despite the fact that the Sphinx was buried in sand for the last couple thousand years already. This becomes even more interesting when you consider all of the recent scientific studies that have come out explaining how the Sahara Desert went from being tropical green to a desert in barely a century, and as recently as 4,500 years ago, the same general time frame of the dates that they ascribed to the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx for being constructed. Guys, this is exciting. I mean, we are literally living on the precipice of learning that the Earth changes naturally and dramatically in far shorter periods of time than what most anyone thought was possible. And I think that's exactly what happened to Egypt, and why the true history of it is surrounded by so much mystery and unanswered questions. I really don't think that they chose to build these incredible structures in the middle of a barren desert, although the Nile River is there. But it seems to me, especially when we look at the dating, that it's far more likely that they started constructing ancient Egypt at the same time that the Sahara was green. And by the way, Egypt is in the Sahara Desert. And when you consider the 4,500-year-old dates for the Sahara turning from green to desert and the alleged construction of the pyramids, which honestly is not surrounded by much evidence at all, I think this is the missing link here on explanation of why we have no idea who did it and when. But the point is ultimately this, that the true history of the ancient Egyptians is many thousands of years older than what we were taught. And it's not until you look at all the little nuanced details that you can start to understand this. And I believe that within our lifetimes, we are going to learn many, many amazing things about our true history of humanity. Probably the most incredible discoveries of our lifetime, aside from aliens, because they're apparently already here. Now, I have a lot more to say, and I couldn't be more excited about my next video, which is going to talk about the origins of the Egyptians, and it's going to tie into many other things. But that video will come after I get back from Peru, which I'm heading out on in just a few days. That's right, I'm going to Peru for the very first time ever. In fact, my first trip ever to the Southern Hemisphere. And I'm going with Brian Forrester and Ben of Uncharted X, and it is going to be amazing. We're going to all the notable sites, and it's going to be incredible. I'll be taking tens of thousands of photos, again, and videos that will be used in many future videos to come, which I'm already sitting on so many images that will be used in videos from my trip to Egypt. And like I said, I'm going to Egypt this October again anyways, so I'll be able to have all kinds of great videos to come. But let me see here. Follow me on Instagram, because that's where I'll be uploading photos and videos and vlogs daily. So it's Bright Insight Instagram. You'll find a link in the description and the pinned comment. But with all that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I got to go pack my bags for Peru. But my name's Jimmy. My channel is called Bright Insight. Hit the like button and subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on these relics, on the 7,000-year-old ostrich egg, with pyramids on them. I mean, if you think they're mountains, explain. Leave a smart comment and explain away, because it just seems, I mean, I think they're pyramids, just look at them. But let's also talk and leave a comment about the wood being found in the pyramid being hundreds of years older than the age of the pyramids itself. I mean, what's the explanation for that? As well as leave a comment discussing the Sphinx water erosion. That's something people, like, look, I said it's undeniable, but people still debate it. But it's kind of hard to understand, because it's like the water erosion's there. So when are they suggesting it happened and how? I mean, it was buried for the last few thousand years. I already said this. I'll wrap this up. Anyways, again, I'm Jimmy. My channel is called Bright Insight. Take care, everybody.